Welcome to the From There to Here podcast, where we talk to people about their journey through life, the challenges they faced on the way, the influences, the people they've met, and how they come to be where they are today. My guest today is Nicole Allison, who is currently the owner of Worcester City Women's Football Club and has a tremendous record of achievement in personal performance in women's football, but also in being instrumental in bringing about the growth of popularity of women's football, etc. So welcome, Nicole.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Michael.
Just to kick us off, perhaps you'd tell us a little bit about your sort of family situation growing up, how you first got to like football, and then how you went about trying to find places to do it and people to do it with.
Yeah, well, I suppose very common for most people, family had a great deal to do with my upbringing, football wise. The influence that my dad and brother particularly had on my love for football was significant. And even though my mum didn't like football at that time, and I say at that time because she's a big fan now of Worcester City Women, of course, she supported me in lots of other ways to enable me to play and to watch football. So yeah, growing up, mum, dad, and a brother who's 6 years older than me. Brother and dad football mad, big Tottenham Hotspur fans. So I grew up whilst in Worcester, so a good 3 hours away from Tottenham. I grew up being a big Tottenham fan. In fact, my dad always says that my first word was actually Tottenham. We always talk about that, and I don't remember a time of suddenly thinking I really like football. It just has always been part of me. Again, from stories of sort of hearing my dad would be playing out in the garden. Obviously, brother being 6 years older than me, he was kicking a ball, and I just wanted to be in and around that. So even before I could walk, dad was picking me up and allowing me to swing my legs at a ball. So I got quite used to it before I could even walk. And just growing up wanting to be involved, watch, talk about, anything to do with football, I was there. But as you correctly said, there weren't really opportunities back in the early 90s when I was 4 or 5 to actually get involved in football, like we see now, little kickers or wildcat sessions where you get 4, 5, 6 year olds playing football. That just didn't exist. So for me, it was all about being in the back garden or being on holiday and just getting involved, getting stuck in. It definitely helped having an older brother who would just utilize me as probably a bit of a decoy in a game or something. But actually, as I started to sort of build my technical skills, I would actually start to be quite useful. And I always remember going away visiting grandparents who didn't live near us. Actually, I had a set of grandparents in Grimsby and a set of grandparents in Tunbridge Wells. We would go and find the nearest field to go and have a game of football in, and always used to meet some locals, some kids and parents that would come and join our game of three at the time. And we always still say now, my dad, my brother and I were undefeated. Whenever we used to play in a field, wherever we were, people would want to join and challenge us to a game. And I often think that they probably thought a 7, 8 year old girl wasn't going to be particularly great, and I was a bit of a decoy. But we never lost a game, so we've still held on to that. I went through primary school wanting to play football, never having those opportunities. Certainly the only girl that was even remotely interested in football. And it's probably I shared this story actually with someone recently. Another one of the clubs that we were having a leadership meeting at St George's Park a few weeks ago. We were talking about our first football memory. One of the ones for me would be playing at primary school, where you could only have the sponge ball that you used to play with up on the top playground, which was for sort of years 3 and above, the big kids. And I
Okay.
remember being in reception year 1 and 2 and always looking over to that playground, wanting to be able to kick that ball. But I was never allowed, because until you got to year 3, you couldn't play. So I used to just wait at the bottom of that playground, hoping a ball would come down so that I could kick it back. And I just, from there, remember understanding that I was the only girl in any of these environments playing football. However, it didn't seem to bother me. So whilst I was aware I was the only girl, it didn't seem abnormal to me. It was just something I had to get through. I didn't feel that bothered. I didn't feel intimidated. I just went for it. And I always feel really lucky now when I speak to people and hear from people who gave up football because they were intimidated or anxious to play with the boys. I feel so grateful that I didn't, and for whatever reason, I didn't experience those troubles and those issues. I remember playing a game for the primary school, again being the only girl, and there was we were away, and I remember there was a boy from the other school who was stood on the sideline just shouting "girly, girly, girly" at me for the best part of the sort of 45-minute hour long game. I scored a hat trick in that game. We won 3-0. And I just always used to let my football sort of do the talking. And it certainly stood me in good stead for life in business, life owning a football club, being a independent women's football club that we are, because you have to be resilient, you have to be strong, you have to make sure that you've got that sort of mental toughness as well to come through many curveballs that come at you.
Absolutely. It sounds like your parents and your brother have played a terrific role in this. Presumably, they never said, "Hang on, Nicole, this isn't really a girl thing." That presumably those words were never spoken.
No, exactly, exactly. And I'm so grateful to all of them for that because obviously at the time you would never think about it, but in hindsight, I know that probably has been a message that other people have heard.
Yes.
But no, for me, it was just always, Nicole, go and do what you want to do, what you enjoy doing. They were very proud of the fact that I would go and score these hat tricks in front of these boo boys. And I don't think any of them would say that they expected me to go and like play for Wolves as I did, or go and work for Tottenham Hotspur as I did, and go and then own my own football club. But they've certainly known that I'm ambitious and I'm driven, and that not a lot stops me when I have an idea in mind.
Well, which is fantastic. So it is great that you experience no hostility or opposition, only encouragement from your parents and your brother. That's magnificent. Apart from the idiot on the touchline that you mentioned, did anybody else sort of put up a barrier or express to you that what you were doing was not a girl thing, as it were, in that sort of language that might have been used at the time?
Yeah, I mean, really, it was the curriculum, the school curriculum, that as soon as you left primary school and you went to secondary school, that was it. You weren't allowed to play football with the boys. So I suddenly went from this environment where I was the only girl playing, but I didn't see that as being an issue, to then suddenly being told, no, you can't play football. Which when you're at the age of 11, 12, when you think about it, is just crazy. And
Yeah,
the lost talent I think that we've had as a nation and over the world, because it's not as if England's the only country that did that,
sure.
is actually crazy. And we've still got a long way to go on that as well, because whilst there's girls football more readily available at schools now, there's still a lot of work to be done. But that was the first sort of real moment that I realised, hang on, I don't have the opportunity to play football like I want to. There were no teams in and around the Worcestershire area either at that point for me to then say, well, okay, I can't play it at school, but I'll play it sort of outside of that. Because I'd been playing at a team in Droitwich when I was sort of 8. But after you got to sort of under 12s, there then just wasn't enough players to be able to play. And back in those days as well, we were playing 11v11 on 11-a-side pitched under 12s, which when you think about it as well was crazy.
Yeah, exhausting,
um,
nothing else.
yeah, so it wasn't great for development. So again, a lot's changed, all for the better in terms of how we structure our football development sessions and coach education and things like that. But from that point on, there just weren't the teams. So I spent for the best part of 5 years not playing organised or competitive football. I'd play in the garden, I'd play in the field with friends after school. And that was my only source of sort of football opportunities. And
And the
again, when
friends
I
you were
think
playing with
back
after school were boys or girls or both?
with boys, yeah, all with boys, just with friends. And again, life is all about, for me anyway, people and connections, relationships, and people that are willing to open doors for you. And there was a brilliant woman who's had an amazing career in women's football and performance called Dawn Scott, who now works at Washington Spirit. But at the time, we're talking back in what would it have been 2001. She was studying at Worcester University. She was also working for the FA for the England women's teams as a sort of performance coach and nutritionalist, I think on a part-time basis, because that was before there was a huge amount of investment into the England women's sides. It was before it was known as the Lionesses, for example. She created the first sort of Worcestershire County girls team under 16s. And I remember our form tutor at school reading out this opportunity to go and do some football training at the university pitches. And I remember coming home and saying, Dad, there's some opportunities to play football. So he took me to those sort of trials. And in fact, I don't think there was really anyone else from the school at all. I met a few, it was for the Worcestershire County. So we barely scraped together a team to begin with, but then it started to build and grow. But yeah, from certainly from my form and even my school, I was the only one. But I played there for 2 years, and it was Dawn who created that team because of her connections to England. She had contacts at Birmingham City and Wolverhampton Wanderers. She told me that I should be playing at high level, and she got me trials at those two teams. So when I was 16, just done my GCSEs, I spent a month trialing with Birmingham City, and
Fantastic.
then I did a month trialing with Wolves. And I joined Wolves, much preferred the environment and the culture at Wolves at the time. So when I was 16, I joined Wolves. I remember playing one game for the reserves and then was put straight into the first team.
Brilliant.
My debut was away to Manchester City, and I played as a sweeper.
Okay, that's not a gentle start, is it?
No, not at all. But again, talk about resilience and teamwork and communication and coming through challenging moments and times, thrown in as a 16-year-old playing with women who were, in their 30s was scary initially, but it was a great life lesson and some brilliant learnings. And I played for Wolves for basically the pretty much whole of my career that I played 11v11. I did spend a couple of years, I spent 1 year living in Germany as part of my undergrad degree. So I spent a year sort of out of football, although I did actually start playing a bit of football over there. And then when I came back, I finished my university degree, which was in Birmingham, whilst also playing for Wolves, moved back to Worcester. And at that point, I decided, because I was working full time, and I felt like I probably needed to focus on career as opposed to put football at the absolute forefront. So I left Wolves at that time and went and joined Redditch United, who are at a lower level at that time. And for me, actually, I was quite okay with kind of taking a step back from the level and the commitment that was required to play at Wolves because, we were travelling up to Manchester, Durham, Newcastle, Middlesbrough, week in, week out, training 2, 3 times a week, not being paid for any of that. So it's quite a huge commitment. You need to be sure that this is what you want to do. And at that time, just graduated. I knew I wanted to spend some time coaching and developing my coaching and work out what I wanted to do in my career. It felt like it was the right time for football to take a little bit of a step back, but still wanted to obviously play. The social aspect of football at that point as well for me was probably more important than the physical and the sort of tactical. So I wanted to be part of a team where I could build my social connections as well.
This is all fascinating. So, no regrets about pulling back from Wolves at in your early 20s, I think.
Yeah, no regrets because women's football was at a very different time back then. It wasn't like I honestly looked at it and thought I could make a career out of playing. If it was right now, then yeah, I would have absolutely gone for it
Yep.
because you're in the environment where you're being supported like a professional. So it would never have necessarily been about the money for me, but actually you're in an environment where you're being supported through strength and conditioning, nutrition, the facilities, everything that you need to be that sort of top athlete. And obviously it's important to be remunerated effectively and appropriately for that. But for me at 22, you're playing on a sand-based astro at school 3 evenings a week, not getting home till 11 o'clock at night. Obviously, in the women's game, it's very different because the vast majority are not paid
Yeah.
to play. So, if you're getting to 23, 24 and you're just starting your career and you've been to university, that's a really difficult time of change for a lot of players where actually football might have to come second, third, or even fourth in their priority list, which is perfectly understandable. And it doesn't mean that they don't want to play football. And I think that's what's really important around what we're trying to do with Worcester City Women as well is we're always trying to create opportunities for people. So regardless as to what level you feel you want to play at, we want to create an opportunity for you to still engage and enjoy football. So obviously our first team is all about us trying to create a high performance culture and environment, and that's about winning and success. And we need players to be absolutely at the peak of their fitness and performance to be playing in that team. But there might well be players that then are, coming to the end of their careers, and also due to their jobs, their professions, they're not able to train 2, 3 times a week, but they still want to play football and they can still offer the game a huge amount. They can still be fantastic leaders and role models to our young under 18s coming through.
Noticeable that you quite early got interested in coaching and developing. Was that always a plan that might end up where you now are, or was it just about just being more involved in football and staying involved perhaps when you were playing less?
I think I've always loved developing people and educating. My dad's a teacher, so my dad has been an educator, and I think I take after him in a lot of ways. So I've always enjoyed teaching, coaching, educating, and I do that a lot in my career now at universities and various things. And the coaching side was something I just fell quite naturally into. So coaching under eights, under tens, under 12s, going to America and experiencing that and really enjoying it as well was brilliant. So learnt a lot there. And at the time, 2009, 2010, again, I didn't see really a career route for female coaches in either in England or in America. You had to be the absolute top, the best to actually really have a good, well paid salary coaching. And so the thought of being so far away, trying to kind of carve out a career in something I wasn't 100% sure about, I was quite good at and enjoyed, but wasn't sure it was absolutely my purpose and what I really felt comfortable being was a big ask. And actually, where I really felt a lot of interest and really kind of caught my interest was in the business and the commercial side of football as a whole. And that's what then persuaded me actually to come back. I applied for a football master's degree in London, and I got accepted onto that. So that's when then I moved back from the States, and that was really then the catalyst for the career in the business side of sport. So coaching's always been something I enjoyed, but I didn't feel like it was going to be a long-term career for me. I thought it was always going to be maybe something that might be on the side, but I'd never really felt that it was going to be my full career. And so, and I was definitely right, because as much as I enjoy developing people, that I do that now through sort of education and academia, through sport business and the practical aspects of that. So I do that on a daily basis through the club, but also working for the University of Worcester, working for the Football Business Academy, and doing various other things for other institutions as well.
So tell us a little about those roles. We're going to talk a lot, I hope, about Worcester City, but just those other non-Worcester City but business roles that you have that are about developing sport. People would be fascinated to hear that, I'm sure.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, certainly the teaching side of things. So through my own agency, consultancy, NA Sport, I have sort of three strands, I would say. So the first one being education, so providing education services to various institutions around sport business, predominantly football, and even more, obviously, of the specialism is the women's football business side. And obviously that's an area that is growing so rapidly for football industry professionals. I then also have a strand of consultancy. So a great example of kind of what I've been doing a lot over the last 6 months or so is working for the charity Switch the Play. So Switch the Play is the UK's only charity that support athletes that are coming to the end of their career on pitch or on track, and they're looking at what does life look like after sport. So I'm a mentor for Switch the Play and also a project manager. So we do a lot of mentoring for lots of these different athletes. So I manage a lot of the projects that go on throughout sort of Switch the Play. And that's been amazing and really rewarding to meet lots of different athletes at different stages of their career. Because as I mentioned before, retirement doesn't just mean when you're late 30s or early 40s. retirement and changes and transition in your career could come at any age. And sport's been, I think, notoriously quite bad at looking after those people and supporting those people when they really need it. You know, the amount of athletes that I speak to that can't recognize their transferable skills because say they've been a professional athlete since they could remember, they can't then translate some of those skills that they've learnt into a CV or to go and work in business and industry. So it's great that charities like Switch the Play exist to be able to support those athletes coming through on that. And obviously we've talked a lot about what I feel I've learned from being somebody who's played sport, not even to a professional level, but playing sport to a good level, high level, and then being involved in sport in the way that I have. You know, the skills that it's taught me, I wouldn't have learned anywhere else. And so actually athletes are extremely employable people, and would be a huge asset to lots of businesses. So that's something I've been really enjoying working on, extremely rewarding. And as I said, being a mentor on that as well as the project manager. So that's developing people, supporting people.
Just that is absolutely magnificent. The more extreme cases, there have been several suicides among former cricketers, particularly, and people in other sports. There are people who go to an after career that, that does not end happily in terms of, alcoholism and other issues of those kind. And I guess it's the lack of preparation, and also there may be nothing better than the thrill of scoring a goal in front of hundreds of people who are greatly appreciative of what you've just done. And we're all familiar with footballers sort of running around arms in the air and everybody's chanting their name. That is never going to happen again once you've retired to quite the same degree. And that must be challenging. So some people have failed to meet it. What would you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think, it's such I think a forgotten about part of sport. And the media narrative is very much, isn't it, around, let's face it, top level male sport and football predominantly. And then we get this idea that every athlete, if you say you're a professional athlete, suddenly has millions of pounds in the bank upon retirement and that life must be amazing for them. But the truth is, for most professional athletes, that's not the case. And certainly for females, when they're even the lionesses, when they retire, they're not going to have enough money to then not work again. They need to have plan B, they need to have investments, they need to have skills that they can then go into the world of work. So I think we're often told through the media narrative that it's amazing to be a professional sports person because you get paid a load of money, and actually that is only reserved for very few. And so
Yeah.
actually
Yes.
what it really looks like is very different. And of course, the stress and strain that athletes put their body through as well can often mean that you come away finishing your professional career with lots of different problems. There's the physical
Yes.
problems, but also then the mental challenges as well. And I speak from a football perspective because that's been my main experience, but we are starting to do better. Clubs are starting to employ more people that look after players, player care departments, with player care leads. And we're seeing that in the women's game as well now, which is brilliant as we're professionalising, getting player care and welfare as kind of core pillars of the organisation's foundations, which are crucial. But we're still really learning about that topic, and we're
Yes.
sort of having to learn a bit on the job in a way. So which is why charities like Switch the Play and the people that are within that, the support that they have from mentors, but also sports psychologists, people that have been athletes before and that have then had support from Switch the Play that then come and actually provide their support to others is amazing. And when you then speak to and get feedback from those athletes that have benefited from support from Switch to Play, you really see how helpful that has been for them, even just to talk it through
Yeah.
and get them to see their own value,
Yeah.
and what they can provide to industry and business and the world after sport. I think that's huge, and there's still more that we need to do, but it's such an important area. And I really am passionate about the women's game, making sure that we don't make some of the same mistakes that the men's game has gone down. So as we're developing the game and the structures of the sport and the governance, we need to make sure that we put things like player care, things like dual career exit strategies, personal development as part of professionalization of women's sport, because we know that careers can be short, and actually even if you have a long career, you're not gonna come away from that as millionaires with never having to work again, with properties all over the world that you've invested in and you're earning from. You still need to be able to have a career, and you should want to have a career,
Exactly.
because when you retire at mid-30s, you've still got a long way to go in your life, and actually it's about trying to empower those people and the knowledge that they have from being professional players to then go and make the sport even better. So that's a big driver for me, as to what I do, both from an NA Sport perspective with my own consultancy, but also then through the club that I own, and us trying to almost be the blueprint for clubs that are starting from almost scratch, and trying to put in these foundations and pillars right from the off.
Truly fantastic. Absolutely. Great. So let's talk about Worcester City, which let's talk about it from day one. How did it go to be where it is today? What you've achieved there is remarkable. It's great.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said before, I certainly didn't grow up as a young girl thinking, God, I really want to own my own football club, because I couldn't see any owners of football clubs, let alone female owners of football clubs. I didn't know how you would even go about that, what it would entail. So it wasn't something that's happened by design. But I suppose seeing opportunity and being driven, it has certainly been two key things for me. When I was the general manager of Tottenham Hotspur Women, being involved in lots of FA meetings, understanding the strategy and the opportunity of the growth of women's football in this country certainly opened my eyes to the potential and how things could be done. And I wanted to make sure that I was in a position where I could genuinely impact the growth of the game. And I felt like one of the best ways to do that would be to run my own club. And obviously, at that point of being general manager of Tottenham, I've had years then of working in the industry already, both in men's football and then women's football.
How did you get into being general manager at Tottenham, which I would imagine was your dream job, given your devotion in childhood years?
Absolutely, yeah. So 20, what would it have been, 2016, 17, Tottenham Hotspur women's won the sort of tier three that they were at that time. They won that league, which meant that they then got into a playoff game against Blackburn Rovers, who won the equivalent Northern Division, and they won the playoff, which meant that they got into the WSL2, which is now called the Championship. So that promotion was massive for them, because it meant that they were part of the FA's Women's Super League criteria. Now, every club that plays in that level had to meet a certain level of criteria from a business off-pitch perspective, and one of those was having a general manager. I knew a few people at Tottenham at the time, and I wrote to them, talked to them about obviously my experience. I was consulting at the time, and I said, "Hey, could I help?" Huge Tottenham fan. A lot of people knew me anyway from previous roles that I'd sort of had to do with them, not actually for them, but I worked for the EFL for many years, so I knew a fair few people at Tottenham, and it really sort of started from there. Had a conversation with them, did a bit of an audit on what I could do, started some sort of commercial consultancy with them, and then pretty quickly got offered the general manager role, which was, as you said, an absolute dream come true. And it really was a role where it was about trying to professionalize that team and get them ready to go into what is the Women's Super League. And we won that promotion in the 2018-19 season. So May 2019, won promotion, which was at that time for the one season only. It was the top two could get promoted. So that gave me the idea as to I want to own my own club. I want to be able to make the impact that I feel I can. But I always thought it'd be great to do that from a club kind of from the bottom right the way to the top. Looked at a few different teams in and around the country. I was living in Hertfordshire at the time. So looked at a few clubs around the area, but actually settled on my home city of Worcester, because I felt huge opportunity at Worcester. It's a city of 100,000 people. It's a city with a strong sporting heritage, but hasn't really hit the big footballing sort of milestones, and I felt like it really deserved that. So did a lot of research into what has existed before, what could exist, and created Worcester City Women in March 2021. on International Women's Day. And the big point around that was that we were an independent women's football club. You know, we were in no way connected to the Worcester City Men's Club or any other club sports team. We were completely self-sufficient and independent. And obviously, yeah, we celebrated 3 years earlier on this year on International Women's Day when we played at Sixway Stadium, which is a fantastic stadium. We had over 500 people there, which for a club that sort of has really been building a fan base for only the last 3 years, we were really happy with. And we've had great success in 3 years. Our first team have got promoted. They won the league in May. We won our league, which was in Tier 5, to then go into Tier 4, which is now the Women's National League. So we're in Tier 4. So we're doing really well. And for a Worcester City team to be competing against the likes of Peterborough United, Northampton Town, Notts County in our league is tremendous. And you know we're wanting to do that in a sustainable way, whereby we're not just focused on purely winning. It's all about as well our greater purpose, which is actually about empowering women and girls. And one of the great advantages of being an independent club is that every decision you make is putting women and girls at the forefront. You know, it's not playing second best, it's not an afterthought, which ultimately when you're part of a wider men's club it can be. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, because I understand that at times, you know, that's where historically the money has been, because that's where the focus has been, that's where the investment has been. But for us, the focus on women and girls and making sure the decisions are right for their development, and it is always at the forefront, is absolutely crucial.
Fantastic. And you're very active in the community in terms of trying to attract people to come along and watch, trying to attract people to come along and play, going into schools. And I think kind of encouraging people to come along and have a go, even if they're not terribly good. I mean, that's kind of okay as well, isn't it? I mean, tell us about that.
Yes, we have a real clear distinction with our performance sort of side of the club, which clearly our first team, our reserves and our under 18s are in the performance side. So we make that really clear to those players that join us at whatever point in that journey and in that pathway, that this is about performance. You know, we want these players to be at a certain caliber, a certain ability, but also the commitment and the attitude wise of being committed to playing at their best. You know, so I mentioned high performance earlier. We are on that mission to create a high performance environment. You don't just do that through sort of clicking your fingers. It takes quite some time, but we're doing that and developing that really well at the moment. And then we have our sort of community participation side as well. So we've started that in the last sort of 6 months or so. We have a Saturday morning women's only beginner friendly session for an hour, where we've got a number of different people that have maybe never played football before, or perhaps they played football at school, but then similar to me, didn't then get the opportunities to play, and so just stopped and haven't played football for 20, 30 years. Now they're back playing. So we run that and then have a coffee afterwards. So it's called Kick and Connect. On a Friday night, I've taken my enjoyment of mixed football seven-a-side in London, brought it to Worcester. So we've started the first ever mixed football sessions in Worcester on a Friday evening. So we have regularly now, you know, 30 odd people wanting to play seven-a-side. There's no league, it's just turn up, join, and have a great game for an hour and a half, which is brilliant. And you see the confidence build as well from the women. Some of them have actually started with us on a Saturday morning, built their confidence, and now they're playing on a Friday as well. And it's great. It's built such a brilliant community, and a lot of those people are then coming and watching us on a Sunday as well and becoming real supporters of the club. And then we've just started as well on a Friday evening girls football. So we're going to be doing that. We've done under 14s and under 16s. We're going to be doing under 12s from the new year as well. That's around participation. It's around creating new opportunities for girls to play.
You say we a lot, but actually, this is very largely driven by you. I think I'm sure you're surrounded by some excellent people, and I'm sure they do a really good job. But you are the driving force, I think.
Yeah, I've definitely been, you know, the driving force, certainly for the first 3 years. You know, I've been at the sort of top of that tree, really driving it. But as you said, I mean, I couldn't have done any of this without the support of some incredible volunteers who have all Well, some of them have come to me through simply by saying, Nicole, I love what you're doing. How can I help? And we've sort of fitted them in, and they've probably had about 8 different roles in the club, from social media to mascots to all sorts. To then other people actually coming to me with sort of specific skill sets, or they're maybe even part of a business who want to align themselves with an innovative organisation that's really supporting the growth of women and girls, so for their sort of diversity inclusion sort of aspects as well. So we have now across the club, including players, about 120, 130 people involved, and that's including like matchday volunteers at Six Ways, board members, people that are leading our community stuff, people that are leading football operations, people that are leading marketing, commercial. It's phenomenal, and everyone does it as a volunteer, and everyone does it because they see the vision. They want to be part of that journey. They're passionate about the city. They're passionate about women or girls football, and they're passionate about doing things differently. So, doing things that's about community and about social cohesion, being part of that movement. A lot of people always ask me, how have you grown this football club? And I feel like what I've done is given people something to believe in, and set out a really clear vision, and then sort of said, people that want to support, please get on the bus and support us going forward. And that's what's happened, and it has been amazing. And whilst I lead it, I absolutely couldn't do it without incredible people that are there supporting me. And you can imagine that there's certainly tough times for me as well, from a personal perspective, trying to manage several different jobs at times, spinning
Yes.
plates, and maintaining the energy. Managing my energy to keep doing what we're doing is sometimes tough, but then that's when you need people around you to help lift you when you're maybe struggling at those times. They can come in, recognize that you need a bit of a lift, and then you can go again.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So what's the next goal? What you've achieved so far is magnificent. What if we're doing this interview in 2 years' time, what would you like to be telling me about that hasn't yet happened?
Yeah, great question. I think more of the same, in that we want to keep moving forward. So from our first team perspective, we've just got to tier four. We want to establish ourselves in tier four and then keep building, and keep moving up. The same then for our reserves and under 18s. We want to keep building those talented players and building that pathway to enable more talented players across Worcestershire, because there's so much talent, to be able to come into our club and develop, have the best coaches available, the best facilities available. So more of the same is the fact that we've focused on making sure we've got the best facilities, the best people, and that has now started to see us have great success. So we need to keep investing in all of that, keep making sure that we develop across our facilities and across our people to ensure that those teams develop. Then from the community side as well, keep building new initiatives that really genuinely make a great impact in the community, and that takes a lot of work to understand what the community needs, is available facility wise to us, and ensuring that continues. I would love to be able to talk in a couple of years' time about our own facility. That's something that's really missing at the moment. We are purely tenants and hirers of facilities in the area, and anyone that's kind of listened to me talk about the need for more female specific facilities across the country, they'll know that I keep banging this drum. But again, as a young girl who used to play football and arrive at pitches that didn't have changing rooms open, and I'd have to get changed in dad's car or behind the car, that's still happening today. It's just crazy. We need to have more female specific facilities available for girls to play football and for women to play football.
Yes.
So I would love to be able to positively impact that as well.
Okay. Well, look, this has been fascinating. I'm sure you have described many what I think other people would see as barriers that you had just kind of just pushed your way through, which is incredibly impressive. As a final question, any advice you would give to anybody who has an objective that they want to achieve, and how they should go about it? How do you just disregard the knocks and carry on, which is what you appear to have done throughout?
I think support network is huge. You need to have a support network. And I think the first piece of advice, actually, and I get my athletes who I mentor to do a bit of this first, is identify who your support network are. Because
Yeah.
actually, a lot of people might not think that they have much of a support network, but when you get thinking about it, you go to different people for different things. So if you need support in, or you need an ear to just rant at, and you don't want a solution, you just need to rant, you need to be able to pick that person that's going to do that for you. But if you actually want solutions, or you want a calm ear, or you need to know who to go to for certain things, so support network is definitely one. Identify who they are, because everybody does have one. And I think the other thing is having that goal and clear objective, or your vision, and understanding that things are going to come at you that are going to try and get you off course. You need to be flexible and adaptable to understand that that is going to happen, and it might throw you off course, and it might put you into a different avenue or a slightly different direction. But if you're clear on what your overall objective is, you'll find your way back to that. And I often try and think of obstacles, whilst obviously at the time something can happen and you think this is a nightmare, this is a disaster. I try and think of it as it's something that's happened, it's an obstacle that's just pointed me in a different direction, which is the direction you're supposed to be going in anyway. And I think just trying to keep open minded as much as possible, in that these things happen for a reason,
Yeah.
trying to see the positive in all of those situations. Why might that have happened that actually has sent you down this way? And how do you then get back into you follow the maze in a different way, eventually ending up at your overall objective. But I think being adaptable is crucial. You can't simply say, right, in 5 years' time, I want to be this, and expect it to be a linear journey, because it won't be. So you need to be adaptable and flexible to make sure that you can manage those curveballs that come at you.
Well, that's a brilliant thought and a brilliant place to end. So, Nicole, thank you very much for joining us on From There to Here.
Pleasure. Thanks, Michael.